I want to thank Rabbi Shulman for good last minute notice for pinch hitting. I almost didn't send him the email. I had a whole group who I sent it to, when we have to have a last minute replacement. Figure what I have to send it to him. It's 3 o'clock in Israel. But I did not know that he happens to be in St. Louis. So you see, you never know. So Baruch Hashem, here we are. It's still only 7:30, so we can start the shir in an hour. We can wait for an hour, and it's a pleasure to welcome Bruchim Habayim Me'Haaretz. Rabbi Shulman is now living in Israel. He's already been on Oleh for the second time for 3 months, 4 months now. He made 5 months. Time
August.
flies.
Since August. So.
Since August. Okay, what's August to December? I don't know my math. Basically, okay. All right, then. Rabbi Shulman, of course, everybody is welcome to his class on Sefer Yoshua, which is going to be finishing in the next, I don't know, 10 weeks or so. And then we're going to...
Yeah, sure. We should be finishing in about 3 or 4 weeks.
3 or 4 weeks. Baruch Hashem.
And then starting Shoftim.
Then we'll make a big deal. When we start Sefer Shav, make a big deal. Okay, Rabbi, Parshat Miketz, Yosef, all kinds of exciting stuff. Why is Yosef different from all the other tribes? I think that's the topic, something like that. Bakasha, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Kalman. Thank you to all of you. 2 apologies. They always say never to start a shir with an apology. I'm going to violate that rule right now twice. The first is that I am a guest in somebody else's house right now. And so at the very last minute, I called out to do a bris today. So I went out of town, came back. So my lighting is makeshift and temporary and poor. So I am in, if I look like I'm in the shadows, I probably am. I apologize for that. But that's the way it is. Couldn't do better than this.
Very clear.
That's number one. Number two, I'm going to share my screen. I don't think I got the sources to Torah in Motion in time for them to post. So I have put it in the chat. Let me do a copy and paste. Copy link. This, please, if somebody can just open that and tell me if you can read it. Yes, good.
Yeah, I can read it. We'll get it up on the same one we can, but yes.
Yeah, no problem. As long as you have it for tonight, I will share it on the screen. Yeah. I wanted you to have it for your notes. Okay, we have a lot to cover in a short period of time, so we're going to try to do this as efficiently as possible. Tonight's shir is, of course, it's Parshat Miketz, and therefore it's about Yosef and his brothers and the story in Mitzrayim, etc. The story of Yosef and his brothers has been rehashed so many times and discussed in so many contexts. I'm sure we've all heard various aspects of the interpretation. What is Yosef trying to do? What's the relationship? Why is he accusing his brothers of being spies? Is he trying to exact revenge on them, like the Radak says? Is he trying to get them to do tshuva, like the Abarbanel says? Is he trying to make his dreams actualize, like Rashi and Ramban? That part of the story has kind of been rehashed many times. I'm going to use that as a backdrop to address what I think is really a very critical piece of the story that's perhaps less known or less realized, and that is what makes Yosef unique in the story of the tribes of Israel. Whatever the dynamic is, whether he's trying to do A or he's trying to do B or he's trying to do C, the fact that he's trying to do anything means that he, Yosef, stands alone and separate and different from the other tribes. And we talk about Yosef and his brothers. What makes Yosef different than the rest of the tribes? Why do we group them as Yosef versus the rest of the brothers? And that's more or less the background of the question that I want to try to address. So we're going to jump right in. I'm going to share my screen, and if you can keep your cameras on, because I have a second monitor and I put you on my second monitor, I can see all the faces. It's very helpful to me to have a second screen, to have your cameras on, but we are going to jump right in. Actually, this I'm going to close because you have it now here. Okay. I actually want to start from next week's Parsha. Forgive me. But I want to start from the bracha Yaakov gives to his children on his deathbed. And there's much to be unpacked in terms of the nature of what Yaakov is trying to accomplish. But specifically, I want to focus on Yosef. Yosef is the the apple of his eyes, the expression goes. Yosef is the Ben Zkunim. Yosef is his love. Yosef, he's finally reunited with Yosef. He's on his deathbed. He turns to all of the tribes. And what does he say to Yosef? What would we expect him to say to Yosef? Be the great leader that you were promised to be. Be the we told Mashiach ben Yosef, be the leader amongst your tribes. Be the whatever you want to say about Yosef. The least expected bracha I would have thought Yaakov would give to Yosef is be fruitful and multiply. It's an odd bracha. Ben parat Yosef, ben parat ale'ayin. Yosef is a fruitful bough. Yosef, be fruitful. Yosef, who's been challenged, Yosef, they tried to embitter him, and they shot at him, and he remained straight, he remained strong. And midei avir Yaakov misham le'evin Yisrael, one of Yaakov, one from the shepherd of Israel. Listen to the bracha. Me'el avicha v'yazreka, may the God of your father help you. V'et Shaddai v'varacheka, and may God bless you. Birchot shamayim me'al, birchot tahom le'vetzetachat. Blessings of the dew of the rain above, blessings of the deep that lies below of the produce. Birchot shadayim v'racham, blessings of the breast and womb, which is another very poetic way of saying, Ben parat Yosef, be fruitful and multiply. Birchot avicha gavru al birchot arai, the blessings of your father have gone over and above the blessings of my parents, until the eternal mountains, Tavat Givot Olam, Tiena Lerosh Yosef, be a leader, be a head, Yosef, Ulekodkod Nazir Echav, and on the crown of the separate one from his brothers. Nazir Echav means separate, like Nazir is separated. So he gives to Yosef essentially the bracha of Puravu, be fruitful and multiply, the bracha of Kel Shakai, God should bless you, the bracha of Shaddai Baracham, be fruitful and multiply, and the bracha that he should be Kodkod, he should have a crown, and he should be separate from his brothers. It's the oddest bracha in the whole sequence. What is he trying to say? What is he trying to accomplish? Or more accurately, what is he trying to acknowledge in the uniqueness of Yosef, separated from his brothers, Nazir Echav, distinct, separate, and then be fruitful and multiply? Where is that in the story of Yosef? So this brings us back to the question. So now we're going to start the Parsha here. What is Yosef trying to accomplish, and why is it so important? And the epicenter around the story, I'm assuming everybody knows the story of Miketz. I'm not going to rehash it. I'm not going to retell it. But in the epicenter of it, at the core of it, he stands opposite his brothers, who have come to him now in Egypt. He's now the viceroy of Egypt. And the brothers come to bring food for their father. And in this dramatic moment, this picture that is extraordinarily dramatic, Perek Membet, Yaakov sees there's no food. He sends his brothers, the rest of the tribes down, and they come and they stand before Yosef. Yosef, Shalit al Haaretz, ruler of the land. Yosef sees his brothers, recognizes them, right? Good number of years since. Vayitnaker alehem, and he makes himself as if he's a stranger to them. And he speaks to them in harsh words. Vayidabertam kushot. Where are you from? What are you doing here? Vayaker Yosef etachavim lo kiru. Yosef recognized them. They didn't recognize him. And here's the key. The whole parasha revolves around this phrase. Vayizkor Yosef etachalamot. Yosef remembered his dreams, asher chalam aleim, that he dreamt about them. And he said to them, Vayomer aleim menaglim atem, you were spies. And from that, the rest of the story unfolds. Everything leads up to this moment. The brothers are standing before him. The critical question, what is Yosef going to do? Yosef remembers his dreams, and he starts a process that is now a one-way street to accuse him of being spies and bring down Binyamin, and they bring down Binyamin, and then he frames Binyamin, and Yehuda has to defend Binyamin. The whole rest of the story unfolds on the basis of this accusation, Miragli Matem, motivated and driven by the phrase Vayizkor Yosef et hachalomot. What is he trying to do? That's the question. What does the dreams have to do with all of this? So famously, I'm just gonna mention it because this is a shir into itself, but I need it as background for where we're going to go. Yosef says there's machloket Rashi and Ramban. Famously, when he sees the brothers coming to him, Yosef et hachalamot, Rashi says, "V'yada shenitkaimu." When he saw that the dreams had actually been fulfilled, so that's when he starts with this accusation of being spies. Says Rashi, and this is Ramban quoting Rashi, "Yada shenitkaimu." The moment the brothers bowed down to him, he knew that the dreams had actually taken place. Albeit maybe one dream had taken place, the first dream, because they were bowing down to him as a source of food, like the sheaves of wheat. But there was a second dream with the father and the mother, and so that certainly hadn't yet taken place. And so he kind of pushes this accusation in order to bring the rest of the family down. That's the assumption of Rashi's interpretation. Says the Ramban. Ramban is very critical of Rashi's interpretation in the sense that the Ramban claims, that only the first dream, even the first dream had not yet taken place. According to in my opinion, says the Ramban, it's the opposite. Meaning that at this moment he sees the potential for the dreams to come true, but they haven't yet been fulfilled completely, because even the first dream, according to the Ramban, hasn't yet been fulfilled. The text only says that Yosef saw the brothers bowing down to him. He remembered the dreams which he had dreamt about them. And says the Ramban, and he realized that not yet were the missing pieces. They're not yet fulfilled. Why not? In the first dream, the brothers bowed down to the brothers' sheaves of wheat bowed down to his sheaf of wheat, meaning he is the source of food. They bowed down to him, but we're missing a brother. Right? Why are we missing a brother? Because Binyamin is not there. We refers to all the brothers. 11 brothers. And therefore, in the second dream, the second dream, it says that the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to him. That's when Yaakov and his wives come down. When he saw that Binyamin wasn't there, so he thought this was a good way of bringing Binyamin himself, meaning accuse him of being spies, release Binyamin, bring Binyamin there. That will force the first dream to take place. And then, of course, the second dream will take place after Binyamin comes down and he accuses Binyamin of stealing and holds Binyamin. It'll force Yaakov to come down in 2 stages and thereby fulfill the dreams in stages, exactly as he dreamt them. That's the Ramban's suggestion of how this whole story unfolds. And then he makes the very famous and very important observation that Lulechen, if it weren't for the fact that he was being driven by his dreams, if it wasn't for the dreams driving Yosef would have committed a terrible crime at this moment. To put his father through all that anguish and to hold incarcerated Shimon and then to hold Binyamin, and the pain it's caused his father. For what? because if he wanted to take revenge on his brothers a little bit, which is what the Radak says, how could he not have compassion for his father? Everything he did in order to fulfill the dreams. He knew that the dreams had to come true, and therefore it was on his shoulders to make them happen. That's the famous argument of the Ramban. He argues with Rashi only on semantics, on the details. But he agrees with Rashi that driving Yosef's motivation here is the fulfillment of the dreams one by one. The first, they come to Yosef as a source of food, the sheaves of wheat, and the second, they come to Yosef and bow to him, acknowledging that he is the leader, the viceroy of Egypt, and those are the two stages of the story. To all of this, there's a very famous article by Nechama Leibowitz, and it appears also in her book on studies in Sefer Breshit. She quotes a famous a comment of Yitzchak Arama, Akedat Yitzchak, who challenges Rashi, Ramban, this entire interpretation and line of thinking with 4 words. Hanoten chalomot yagish pitronam. He who gives dreams should enable those dreams to come true. Meaning, says the Akedat Yitzchak, who gave Yosef the authority to try to manipulate stories and events in people's lives in such a way that they should match the dreams that he dreamt. Who gave him that right? Puts his father through all that anguish. He puts his brothers through all that anguish just so that he can say, okay, the details, this detail happened this way, this detail happened that way. We're going to make this happen. We're going to make that happen. Who are you, Yosef? And there's a whole other school of thought, therefore, Abarbanel and many other commentaries, Malbim and Amakdavar and the Netziv, who all suggest that Yosef's not being motivated by his dreams. He's not trying to make his dreams come true. What he's trying to do is to force his brothers to do tshuva. You've all heard that interpretation, right? He's trying to test their loyalty to Binyamin, their loyalty to Yaakov. He's trying to test to see if they've made up for, if they've done tshuva for what they did to him, and therefore he's kind of manipulating the circumstances so that their context with Binyamin will be exactly what his relationship was with the rest of the brothers, to test whether their love for Binyamin or loyalty to Binyamin is there or whether it's equally as shaken as it was with Yosef. That's the third approach to the story. I think there's a lot of truth to it. What I want to pick up on is this question. Does Yosef, why is the dreams the dynamic, the motivator, the driving force between whatever Yosef's trying to do? And I do believe, in the pshat of the story, that Yosef is not trying to make the dreams come true. What Yosef is trying to do is, in fact, enable and force his brothers to do tshuva or to test their tshuva. I accept that position of the Rabbi now. I think it's correct. It still doesn't answer the question of the Akedat Yitzchak, which is why? Who put that on Yosef's shoulders? That's my question. And one observation I want to make with regards to the dreams, because I think it's just something which we need to recognize. The Ramban makes an astounding suggestion that, unlike Rashi, that the first dream has not yet taken place, and everything he did was to enable the second dream to take place. I want to point out a very simple observation. This is the text of the first dream. This is the text of the second dream. In the first dream, it says, Shimona chalam hazeh shechalamti, listen to the dream. He comes to his brothers in the field. And he says to his brothers in the field, in this dream, Hine anachnu almim alomim b'toch hasadeh. We are binding our sheaves in the field, My sheaf of wheat stood up. And your sheaves stood around and bowed to mine. In the second dream, he says, in the second dream, he says to his brothers, the sun and the moon and 11 stars are bowing to me. There are several significant differences between these two dreams. According to Rashi, when the brothers came down the first time, the first dream had taken place, and now we are moving to a manipulation of the circumstances for the second dream. Says the Ramban, no, the first dream hasn't yet taken place. Why not? Because we're missing Binyamin. There are 11 brothers, not 10. Okay. Take a good look at verse 6. We're going to just for a moment at verse 7 in this text. How many sheaves of wheat are there in this text? Somebody unmute and tell me the answer. How many sheaves of wheat are acknowledged in this text?
One for each brother, though we're not sure if Benjamin was old enough to be working in the field.
Oh, the answer is we don't know. It doesn't say. He's talking to his brothers, but Benjamin is, if Yosef is 17, Benjamin is 6 years younger. He's 7. He's 11. The other brothers are all older than him. It's quite possible that if Yosef is the Ben Zkunim, Binyamin is even younger. Binyamin's a child. Binyamin's working in the field of the rest of the brothers. Arguably, and I think this is the pshat driving Rashi, Binyamin is not in this conversation. It does not say how many sheaves of wheat. It just says the source of the bowing is the wheat. You're seeking food, and my sheaf of wheat is providing it. But there's no number here. The only number is in the second dream, sun, moon, and 11 stars, bowing down to me, not to a disguised me, but to the real me, limishtachavim li. In other words, what I'm suggesting, and I think this is pretty straightforward, as far as Rashi is concerned, at that moment that the brothers come down, 10 brothers, Vayizkor Yosef et hachalomot, he remembered his dreams. He's looking at the first dream in its entirety. The 10 brothers without Binyamin, because Binyamin is the younger brother, he's not out in the field with them, coming for wheat to him, and he's providing the wheat. Disguised as the viceroy of Egypt, they can't recognize him. They don't recognize him. That's what the text said we saw before. That's exactly the first dream. Now, in order for the dreams to come true, what has to happen next? So according to the Ramban, I need to create a circumstance with the 11 brothers that they're without Yaakov and his wives. But if Rashi is correct, if this dream has already happened, then I need to move from dream 1 to dream 2. Dream 2 has Yaakov and his wives and the brothers bowing down to him, knowing that he is Yosef mishtachavim li. What's missing? Here's dream 1, already fulfilled. Dream 2, when Yaakov comes down to Yosef in Mitzrayim. What's missing? I don't need the story of Binyamin to move from dream 1 to dream 2. I just need to tell the brothers who I am and tell Yaakov and the family to come down to me in Egypt. And that'll bring about the second dream. The whole ruse with Binyamin is irrelevant. It doesn't fit. I don't need it. So there's a fascinating article by Rav Medan. It appears in 2 places. One, it might actually appear in English as well. It appears in his new book on Bereshit called Ki Karov Elecha. It appears originally in Megadim. It was a very famous polemic with Rav Yoel Ben Nun, what's driving Yosef's motivation. But he makes one really most extraordinary suggestion, which is Yosef in his drive to get his brothers to do tshuva, everything is driven here by the motivation to test his brothers' resolve. When Yosef accuses them of being spies and therefore not to come down without Binyamin, what was Yosef's anticipated outcome? What did Yosef want to happen? So Mephoshim say they wanted to isolate Binyamin and bring down Binyamin by himself, etc. Says Rav Medan, nothing doing. The test of the brothers' resolve would have been had they come back to him in Egypt either without Binyamin, because no way are they going to let Binyamin out of their sight or out of Yaakov's sight, or to come down with Yaakov and the entire family. Yosef tested them by setting up a circumstance whereby they would refuse to bring down Binyamin. That was what he was hoping for. And when he sees Binyamin from afar and he bursts into tears because he thinks that they're going to sell Binyamin as a slave the same way they sold him. And that's why he accuses them and he changes, right? But that wasn't his plan. His plan was that they should defend Binyamin and not bring Binyamin down to Mitzrayim. And that would have moved us from dream 1 to dream 2. That would have tested the brothers' tshuva. So what Yosef doesn't know is the extent to which Yehuda in next week's parsha explains that he will sacrifice himself on behalf of Yosef. That he doesn't know. So once he hears that and he realizes that there's a different dynamic going on, and so he reveals himself to his father. But everything is driven by not the technicality of the dreams, but by the desire for Yosef to make sure that their brothers are whole, that there's a family, that they're devoted to each other, that they're not going to sell Binyamin as a slave the way they sold him. That's what's driving Yosef. And so we move from the first dream to an attempt to bring the family down without, or to test their loyalty to Binyamin. He thinks they failed. In the end, they passed this test, and so he reveals himself, and they bring the family down. That's the background. Now, that would explain a little bit of what's going on between Yosef and the brothers. It doesn't answer my core question, which is, Vayizko Yosef et hachalamot. Why are the dreams so foundational to Yosef's motivation? And here I'm going to tell you my punchline. I normally leave the punchline from the end of this year. I'll tell you my punchline. Because I think it's to demonstrate and to unpack it that's so important. To Yosef, the dreams aren't about fulfilling the dreams and the technicalities of the dreams this way or that way. That's not what the dreams are about. To Yosef, go back to the question of why he received these dreams in the first place. He's now looking back and realizing, Yosef et chalamot, and realizing that the dreams, and maybe he's already realized it, they're not about fulfilling a technical prophecy, technicalities this way or the other. They're a message from he who gives the dreams. Hanoten chalamot, says the Akedat Yitzchak. Yagish bitunam, says, I would argue no. Hanoten chalamot, he who gives the dreams, gives Yosef a message. And it's that message that mandates and motivates and drives Yosef. That message is, you, Yosef, are responsible for your brothers. You're going to be responsible for their livelihood. You're going to be a leader amongst them, but you are responsible for them. That was the same message, by the way, that Yaakov was trying to give Yosef when he gave him that ktonat pasim. Right? When he gave him that coat in the first place, just didn't quite get it right. And maybe we'll have time, we'll talk about why that was important. But the message is, Yosef, you have a responsibility to your brothers. Vayizkor Yosef et chalamot. And so everything now is driven by that responsibility. But that's how Yosef sees dreams. He sees dreams not as a prophecy. He sees dreams as a mandate to act, as a message that says, I give you information so you can do something with it. And that's core to Yosef's whole life. If you look at the dreams that Yosef encounters in Egypt, it's also interesting that every time Yosef encounters dreams, they're always double. He has his own two dreams. He has the dreams of the two servants of Paro in the jail, the Srisei Paro, the Sarah Mashkim and Sarah Ophir. They're together. That's two dreams. And Paro has two dreams. And when he gets to the two dreams of power, he says that the reason it's repeated is because this is happening. It's real. We need to do something about it. Yosef sees these double dreams everywhere he goes, because it's a one-off dream. You can say is an accident. You can say is you were thinking about something. A double dream with the same message says, okay, there's something here. For example, if you take a look at Yosef when he stood with Paro, he interprets the whole dream. And Paro's dreams aren't complicated. Neither are the butler and the baker's dreams. They're not complicated. But when he finishes interpreting the dream and explains these are 7 years, and these are 7 years of famine, 7 years of good, he then says to Paro, V'ata yirei Paro ish navon v'chacham v'shiteo l'eretz Mitzrayim. Paro, you need to find somebody insightful, somebody wise, and set him over the land of Egypt so that he can prepare the land during the 7 years of good and be ready to provide the food, save it, invest it, put it in the bank so that you have it for the 7 years of famine. Now, of course, Paro is going to turn around and say to his servants, hey, who's wiser and more capable of doing this than Yosef himself? And suddenly Yosef is elevated to a position of power. Was Yosef expecting or anticipating that he would be elevated to such a position of power based on the interpretation? Maybe. I don't know. But the Ramban raises this as a challenge. And he says, Halio etz lemelech nitanu. What gave Yosef the authority, the chutzpah, to make a suggestion to the king? All Yosef was brought to do was to interpret the dream. So the Ramban says there must have been something in the dream that tells Yosef he has to interpret the dream, or he has to suggest a course of action. But I'm not sure that's true. I think the answer lies in the fact that this was how Yosef perceived the role of dreams. When he encounters the butler and the baker in the jail, and they say to him, we have this dream, and we don't understand it. And Yosef says, tell me what the dream is. They tell him, and he interprets the dreams. But then he tells them, there's a course of action to be taken here. When he turns to the butler and he says to him, in 3 days' time, to quote the unquotable, you will buttle once again, right? In the 3 days' time, he then says to him, Kartani el Paro. Go remember me to Paro. Go bring my case to Paro. This is an opportunity for Yosef to be heard, because I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews. I haven't done anything here. I'm innocent. Bring my case before Paro. He sees the dreams as a message, not just for the Sahamashkim, but as for himself. And that's exactly what happens by Paro. He's brought before Paro to interpret dreams. He says, God will interpret the dreams. I'm just an agent. But by that message, he realizes the message isn't for Paro. Who cares about Paro? What, God has to tell Paro what he's going to do in the dreams? God has to tell Paro what he's going to do about 7 years of famine? What does God need Paro for? He needs Yosef. And therefore, Yosef sees the dreams as a mandate to act, to do something, to see them as a responsibility placed on the shoulders of the one who either receives the dreams or interprets the dreams. And in this case, that's always Yosef. And I think that goes all the way back to the story of Vayizkor Yosef at the Chalamot. The very first dreams Yosef received, and he realized that the dreams weren't just random, arbitrary delusions of grandeur. They were, in fact, a mandate of responsibility. In the first dreams that he himself had, responsibilities are for his brothers, and for their tshuva, which he only realizes when they're standing before him after everything unfolds. Before Paro, he sees them as a mandate to enable himself to save Egypt. And to the Saramashkim, it's a mandate to bring his case before Paro. In other words, in every instance, Yosef's interpretation of the dream drives Yosef to act on the basis of the fact that the dreams are speaking to him. They're not just about bringing them to fruition. They're a mandate, they're a representation, they're a statement that he needs to take a responsibility as a leadership role here. And we're going to talk about that leadership in a moment. Chazal unpack this in a very powerful way. They talk about the nature of dreams. There's a Gemara in Brachos that says, there's a whole sugya in Brachos about dreams. The Gemara in Brachos says, a dream not interpreted is like a letter not read. A dream has to be interpreted, has to be read. But the interpretation isn't just what are the signs foretelling. It's an interpretation, it's a mandate. And the Gemara expresses this in a fascinating way. The Gemara says, continuation of the same sugya. There are 24 interpreters of dreams in Yerushalayim. I once dreamt a dream. I went to all of them. Each one interpreted the dream differently. But listen to this. The kulam nitkaimubi, and they all took place. They all happened. L'kayem ma shene'emar, to fulfill that which it says in a text. Kol hachalamot holchim achar hapeh. Dreams follow the interpretation given to them. What does that mean? Dreams follow the interpretation of the mouth, the interpretation given to them. It means that the message of the dream is going to depend on how you, the receiver of the dream, interpret the dream and therefore live your life according to the mandate of that dream. That's what the phrase means. There isn't some objective context. This dream is going to speak about a prophecy that's going to take place in such and such a year, and you got to go figure out what it means. It's about you, or me, or whoever receives the dream. It's about a mandate. It's about how we interpret it and now verbalize it and see it as a call to action. What's fascinating here is there is no such verse. So the Gemara challenges that. Wait a second. What kind of verse is that? There's no such verse. Says Rabbi Lazar, there is a verse. When Yosef interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker, that's exactly what happened. He interpreted Yosef's interpretations of the dreams, which were a mandate to act according to the dreams. That's exactly what it says. Dreams follow their interpretation, their interpreter. They're not objective. They're very subjective. And the subjective is the mandate to act on the basis of them. So what's driving Yosef? Why is there a mandate to act? What does he need to act about? That's the question. That's the key question. And here, share with you, again, this is part of a piece of, it's actually almost a footnote in this article by Rav Medan. It actually is a footnote. I think it's one of the most extraordinary insights to Yosef and his distinct and unique role amongst the tribes of Israel. Yosef, the beginning of Yosef's story, Elah told it Yaakov. Yosef and Shvas Shanayo we're going back to last week's parsha. He was 17 years old. He was a na'ar. He was a young lad. He was with Bill and Zilpah. And he would bring to his father any bad report about his brothers. What's going on? Extraordinary. And then Yosef gets rewarded for all of this by being given a ketonet pasim, this coat of whatever this coat represents. Ketonet is a garment of kahuna. What is going on in all of this? So the background to Yosef's story is not a vacuum. The background to Yosef's story is the sequence of events that are taking place when Yaakov comes back to the land of Israel. And from the moment Yaakov's encounter with Esav ends, Yaakov's entire life begins to unfold. Yaakov's encounter with Esav ends, Esav goes home, Yaakov comes to Shechem, and immediately has the story of Dinah, and the story of Shimon and Levi, and then the story of Reuven and Bilhah, which is the oddest story of all. And then Yehuda and Reuven and the brothers, and they're out to sell Yosef as a slave. And Yosef's dreams pit him against the rest of the brothers. So the background to all of this is really simple, very straightforward, but it has to be understood. And that is that in the aftermath of Yaakov's encounter with Esav, there's a vacuum that's created. Brothers are watching Yaakov literally bow down to Esav. And in that moment, Yaakov's life kind of challenges them. And he says to them, okay, I'm not in a position to be the great Yaakov, head of this family, moving forward. We need somebody to step up into that role, say the brothers. Yaakov, you can't have the head of the family of the tribes of Israel bowing down to Esav 7 times and calling him Adoni, my master. And then they come to Shechem and they come to the story of Dinah, and Yaakov doesn't do anything about Dinah, and Yaakov is silent, and Yaakov is passive. And so Shimon and Levi stood up and said, wait a second, this can't happen. And so they act. Reuven's efforts to take Bilhah as his wife, so to speak, if you remember that story. So the Rivam of Yosef B'Choshor and many others suggest that it was an act of defiance. Reuven stood up and said, if Yaakov is not going to be the leader of this family, I will. And which was not uncommon in the world of kings and in the world of leaders, in the world of tribes. Look at the story of Adoniyahu, who took David's wife's Pilegesh on the rooftop, right? Reuven went and took Yaakov's Pilegesh and essentially said, if Yaakov's not going to be the leader of this family, I will. And when he's rejected for it, Shimon and Levi stood up in the story of Shechem. And when Yaakov criticized Shimon and Levi for it and rejected them, you can get a sense from the end of Parshat Vayishlach that there's a vacuum being created. And into that vacuum, there's a need for the next generation of a leader amongst the tribes to emerge. And so that conflict, that leadership, that tension, who will lead the tribes of Israel, is between Yehuda, right? Reuven fails in his efforts with Bilhah. Shimon and Levi failed in their efforts with Shechem. That leaves next in line is Yehuda and Yosef. Yehuda from the Rachel and Yosef from Leah. And that's the tension. The tension on the end of Parshat Vayishlach is a leadership vacuum that's been created in the aftermath of Yaakov's return. And Yosef is the right choice, says Yaakov. He's the firstborn of Rachel, who was his primary wife. Yosef, he gives him his Tonet Pasim, this coat, which was essentially a coat of Kuhuna, or of leadership, of Malchus, or however you want to call it. And he says to him, okay, you are responsible. We'll make you the next leader amongst the tribes of Israel. He has a firstborn status. He now has a Cohen status. He's the right person. The only problem with Yosef is that he's only 17 and all the other brothers are much older than him. So that doesn't stand him well. But in that context, I can see the dreams being interpreted both by Yosef and by the brothers as a way of saying, okay, I've been given a mandate to lead this family. So I'm the natural heir to Yaakov's leadership amongst the tribes. It falls on his shoulders. But here comes the critical question. We are at a turning point in the story of Sefer Breshit. And you can separate and divide the book of Breshit into 2 clear, distinct parts. Everything from the beginning and the story of, really from creation, but certainly Adam, and Noach, or Adam and Cain, Noach, Mabel, the tower, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, everything up until that point. And then the tribes, the 12 tribes born in Parshat Miketz, from that point, the 12 sons, the 12 tribes till the end of the book. What distinguishes them? And here's the thesis. If you come away with anything from the Shir, this is the piece. In the world of Sefer Bereshit, there is a transformation, there's a transition taking place about the nature of the Jewish people. Everything up until this moment in time has been about the story of Bechira, the choice of the individuals who stand out as righteous amongst their generation. Adam, Cain against Hevel, Noach against the generation of the flood, Shem and Yefet against Cham. There is a sense that in every story there is a righteous individual or group of individuals and a less righteous group of individuals. And the story is a story of who is going to stand out and carry the message or the banner of divinity forward. Abraham stands against the backdrop of the Tower of Babel. If you didn't know that Abraham was alive at the story of the Tower of Babel, I think there's a shir of mine somewhere in the Torah Motion website on that topic. Abraham stands out against the story, the backdrop of the Tower of Babel. Yitzchak stands against Yishmael and all that Yishmael represents. Yaakov stands up against Esav and all that Esav represents. In every step of this way, Eile Toldot, Abraham, Eile Toldot Yitzchak, Eile Toldot Yaakov, the story is about the individual righteous who stands up against the rest of that generation. And there's a selection process going through. There's the notion of when God says to Abraham about his children, he has Yishmael and he has Yitzchak, he says to him, Yishmael will be great, Yishmael will have 12 sons, but the family line will carry through Yitzchak. Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Esav, Yaakov, a brother, says the Navi, I chose Yaakov, I rejected Esav. The fundamental theme of Sefer Bereshit is you have to earn that status. It doesn't come by right, it doesn't come by birthright, it has to be earned. It's an interesting observation. There are a lot of firstborn conflicts, the Bechor conflicts in Sefer Bereshit. If you look at the whole story, the firstborn never gets the right of the firstborn. Right? Yishmael is the firstborn against Yitzchak. Yitzchak is chosen, Yishmael is rejected. Esav is the firstborn of Yaakov. We all know that story. Right? Even Ephraim and Menashe, at the end of in Parshat Vayechi, Yaakov switches his hands. Reuben is the firstborn, he gets rejected. The firstborn's not a right. You have to earn a status. That's true in the world of the Avot, who are basically righteous, the whole concept was that they have, by definition, have to be righteous because they carry the message of the Shekhinah. And if you're not righteous, you're going to get rejected from that line. Right? If you're a Yishmael, you get written out of the story. If you're an Esav, you get written out of the story. But there comes a point in time in which that can no longer be the driving operational mandate. You can't keep rejecting out of the family, so to speak, those who don't deserve to be in it, or those who aren't righteous. Because eventually you move from the world of the individual to the world of the family, the world of the tzibur, the world of the group. And Rav Kook famously said that the word tzibur is an acronym for Tzadik Bet Resh, an acronym for Tzadikim Binonim and Reshaim. In any given tzibur, you're going to have those who aren't worthy. So what are you going to continue to select out of the family every single time? here's a Kuzari. Kuzari makes an interesting statement. This is unrelated to our topic at all in terms of the context here. It's talking about the age of the world and the Masorah that we have at the age, but he makes a fascinating distinction. He says the Masorah of the age of the world came through individuals from Adam to Shet to Enosh to Noach, Shem, Ever, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, to Moshe. These special people. But each one of these special people, had children. And the children are like klipot. They're like what's the word?
Like a peel. Klipa is like a peel.
Like a peel.
You peel off.
Yeah. Einam domim lavot. They're not like the parents. And the divine character, this prophetic tradition that went from Abraham to Yitzchak to Yaakov, doesn't embrace the banim. No, it's only for the Yechidim. Are you Yechidim? Ad sholid Yaakov Avinu 12 shvatim, until Yaakov bore 12 sons. Kulam ru'uyim le'inyan Eloki, all worthy. And now I have a whole family that is worthy. Okay, so I'm going to challenge the Kuzari on this simple basis. Everything we know about the Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, start with Abraham, 10 tests, loyal to God, faithful to God, spreading the message about God. Yitzchak, building mizbeachs and building wells and carrying his father's message. Yaakov is struggling and Garti and Tayag Mitzvah Shemarti, it says the Medrash. Yaakov's whole essence. Yaakov is an oath to God. Yaakov is a dream to God. Yaakov is a prayer to God. The Avot established prayer. They established relationship with God. What prayers did the children, did the Shvatim innovate? What relationship with God did the Shvatim innovate? The story of Shechem, Dinah, and Shimon and Levi? The story of Reuben and Bilhah? The story of Yehuda and Tamar? The story of the sale of Yosef? Can you cite me any positive, profound, innovative relationship with God identified with any of the tribes of Israel in Sefer Breshit?
Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael.
That's a medrash. I want the text. I want a positive story that says here somebody innovated something spiritual in the relationship with God. And the answer is there's none.
There is one. Yehuda, Tzadka Mimeni.
Tzadka Mimeni. Okay, open to interpretation. Open to interpretation.
No, but that's not open to interpretation. This is a fact. He could keep quiet.
I don't necessarily know that that's I'm not necessarily arguing that there's a spiritual dimension there. Okay, I think he was right. At Tzadka Mimeni, she was more righteous than him. But there's nothing, doesn't talk about God in that story. What I'm saying to you, what I'm suggesting to you is that the world of the Avot is fundamentally different than the world of the Shvatim or the Banim. In the world of the Avot, by definition, is a world of Bechira. If you're righteous, you are selected, you are Eila Toldot, the continuation of this, the line of Sefer Breshit continues through you. If you're not, you are rejected. But when it came to the Shvatim, when it came to the tribes, when it came to the group, there's nothing positive we're told about in the stories. There's nothing, they don't do anything good. Everything they do is bad.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I think the fact that when Shimon and Levi, when it says they went down to save their sister, I think we can look and see that that's the first time that brothers saved sisters. That sibling.
I'll give him credit for
because you said.
I'll give him credit for that.
So great.
Wait. I'll give him credit for that. But at the same time, Yaakov criticizes them for it for good reason. Because when they went into Shechem, they not only did they save Dinah, but they killed everybody and they spoiled the city. They took the spoils of war. Mm-hmm. And in so doing, they destroyed the motivation of their own efforts to save Dinah.
Mm-hmm. And yet, to quote my teacher, Rabbi David Silber, He said, and yet look at the end of the Parsha, who has the last word. It's not Yaakov.
And I'm not sure, but we can argue. My point is that you have to stretch to find. I'm arguing. You'll hear where it's going in this end. Hang on a second. You'll hear where it's going. I'm arguing, and I think it's fair to say that in comparison to the Avot, there's nothing spiritual, godly, inyan eloki in the stories of the Shvatim.
Okay, I will give that.
Hang on a second. And that, I think, is key because Yosef is different. Yosef is different. The primary description of Yosef when he goes down to Egypt is Vayehi Hashem et Yosef. God was with him. It says it several times. Vayara Hashem, Vayara Danavki Hashem ito. Even everybody around him saw that God was with him. Yosef carried the Shechina with him. This Inyan Eloki that the Kuzari speaks about, Yosef carried it with him, whatever it means. I have no idea what it means. But Hashem et Yosef, it says it again at the end of the parak. That by the Sarah Mashkin and the Sarah Ophim and the Sarah and Beit HaSohar, 4 times it says that God went with him into Egypt. In fact, Rashi makes the observation that the Shekhinah can only rest on one Av at a time. And therefore, when the moment Yosef took the Shekhinah with him into exile, it no longer rested on Yaakov's shoulders. Yaakov, the Rashi says this at the very end of when it says that I put the Rashi in here, but Vatachi Ruach Yaakov Avihem, that when they finally saw each other at the end, Yaakov's spirit was revived. So Rashi says, Sharta alav Shechina shepasha mimenu, because for all those years that Yosef was in Mitzrayim, the Shechina departed from him. The Shechina rests on the Avot individually, never more than one at a time. There's a transition taking place, one generation after the other, until you get to the Shvatim. And now the question is, what's the nature of the Shvatim going to be? And here we only have 2 minutes left. You'll allow me to finish. I just want to kind of give you the core punchline of all of this, which is that Yosef realizes at the moment that his brothers stood before him that he has a choice to make. Standing before him is a choice. Does Yosef allow his brothers who have committed the most heinous of crimes, a crime that would make any other crime of Sefer Breshit pale in comparison? Cain killed one brother. The brothers killed Yosef. They sold him into slavery. The notion that they could be saved or reprieved from this act of selling Yosef as a slave. In the context of Sefer Breshit, what should have happened at that moment is that Yosef should have allowed, the brothers should have been written out of the story, and that selection process should have gone on one more generation, and Yosef should have been the 4th Av. And that's reflected in Chazal. Chazal actually say that. They say it, a very obscure medrash, but I think it's a very powerful message. They say it in Gemara in Sota that says, Ra'ui Yosef letzet b'minu 12 shvatim, that Yosef should have begat 12 tribes, because there was a Masoret that the last grouping of the tribes together as a family would be 12. So Yishmael has 12 children, Esav has 12 children, wherever that Masoret comes from, I have no idea. Says the Gemara, Yosef could have also had 12 children. Because he could have been and he should have been the next Av. The Mishnah Rabbi Eliezer. It says, Keneged arba avot v'arba imot, the 4 species we take on Sukkos, corresponding to the 4 avot. And the Gemara Mishnah Medrash says, V'alosh l'shayin, what do you mean 4 avot? There are only 3. Yosef nikra min avot. Yosef's one of the avot. Why is Yosef one of the avot? Because he has 2 children who emerge as part of the 12 tribes. So Yosef establishes tribes. The same way Yaakov established tribes. Yosef establishes 2 tribes. That's what Yaakov says to Yosef. Reuben v'Shimon, Ephraim and Manasseh, Reuben v'Shimon, you lead. That your sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, will be like my own children. You created tribes. you are like the fourth Av. And in fact, says the Gemara, he could have even had 12 tribes. He chose not to. He chose to remain a Ben. He chose a path to unite the tribes together, to forge a path of tshuva, and to recognize that in the world of the Shvatim, not everybody's going to be righteous. And so that's the contribution, that's the unique message of Yosef in Mitzrayim. The unique message of Yosef in Mitzrayim is a choice he makes. And that choice is to hold the tribes of Israel together. Not to continue this process of bechira, of selecting out the righteous from the wicked, which would have meant Yosef would have been the next Av, and the tribes would have been rejected for all of what they did with the sale of Yosef. He sees the dreams, and he sees them as a mandate to be responsible for the spiritual integrity of the entire family of Israel. Your sheaves to my sheaves. You're bowing down to me. I am now going to hold the spiritual integrity of this family together. He doesn't understand that when he's 17 years old, but he understands it now. And the moment he sees his brothers, and he realizes the responsibility that it gives him to establish himself not as the next Av, but to be mochel, to forgo that honor, and to establish the tribes as 12, in fact, and hold them together. That, I think, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, right? That, I think, is where Yosef's unique role comes from. When Yaakov says to him, you have Ephraim and Manasseh, your Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be like my Reuben and Shimon, and he gives him the status to create sub-tribes, he essentially acknowledges that Yosef is a quasi-Av who chose to remain a Ben. He could have been the next generation. He could have rejected the brothers, and he could have just continued the story. God, the Shekhinah was with him. The Shekhinah was with him in Egypt, which means that it wasn't anywhere else. And yet he chose to bring the family together. And so Yaakov says he's a Nazir Achav. He was separated from his brothers, unique in status, unique in contribution, unique in character, unique in godliness. Yosef at Tzaddik. He gives him a ton of pasim. He calls him Kohen Gadol. Right? But that's the mandate, and it takes Yosef to say, "I take the coat off and bring the family, the children together." That's the responsibility that the dreams gave him. Like Rivka, when she went and she got a nevuah from the Navi about Yaakov and Esav, she saw that as a responsibility, as a mandate to act. Yosef saw the dreams as a mandate, and when the brothers stood before him, he understood what that mandate was about. The mandate was to hold the tribes of Israel together as 12, to allow himself to be a Ben, not an Av, to express that humility by essentially bringing all the tribes back to Yaakov. And so the first dream took place. The second dream is his mandate to bring Yaakov and the family and the 12 tribes all together as one. And ultimately, Yosef becomes the hero of the story.
Rabbi, his dream also comes true. Et achai ani mevakesh.
Okay. Okay. We could unpack that, but that would take a different share. But yes.
No, but he did. Yeah, he did it. According to you, he has done it.
Exactly what he does. He seeks his brothers to bring him back. I don't think at that time it was probably more a kind of a slip of the tongue, but nonetheless. Yep. All right.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. Listen, everybody, you can invite you 1 p.m. Monday afternoons, 8 p.m. in Israel. Everybody's welcome. Rabbi Shulman has his weekly class. As he mentioned in the beginning, he's been doing Sefer Yeshua for over a year. We'll be finishing in about 3-4 weeks, and then we'll move to Sefer to show up to, but you can come for the end of Yeshua. I think you'll understand the class even if you haven't been coming up now. So that's every Monday at 1 p.m. So this is just, an extra bonus shear. Thank you very
No,
much.
it's Tuesday.
I'm Tuesday. Thank you. I'm glad you're listening. 1 p.m. on Monday, of course, it's Speak Rum. It's really fascinating. Sheer our Bereshit Beit Medrash. That's correct. Monday. Thank you. I'm glad people are listening. And okay, I've been trying to solve our email issues. I'm a little bit whatever. So I mentioned at the beginning. I'm sure almost nobody got the reminder about this class, and that may be true for the next couple of classes. My sitter class, you may not get a reminder. I don't know, but of course it's still on. All the classes are on. You can go to the website. If you're not sure, you can look. If you want to listen to my podcast on Parsha, I don't think it's up yet, but the Hanukkah one is there. You can listen on Spotify. You can go to the website, even if you don't get emails. So what can I say? But we're working on it. This is apparently a system-wide issue that's affecting lots of people. So I do, apologize for that. And that's it. So I'll be on tomorrow morning, 9:25, my regular shir. Rabbi Leiptag will be this week. We'll have all our regular shirim this week. Everybody who's speaking regularly is speaking, I believe, this week. Shuli Mishkin is back on Christmas Day, December 25th, or regular Thursday shir. And so we'll have so look on the email if you don't get, and look on the website, but hopefully you will start getting emails soon. And the powers of technology, like I mentioned again, Google has tightened up its, don't ask me, I don't know, it's security, and they're not letting emails go through as much. So we're actually probably just going on to another system. But anyway, be that as it may, we look forward to learning with you. And please invite a friend to come join all our wonderful shirim, and wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi, how long are you in this side of the Atlantic for?
Till the 7th of January.
Oh, so you're here for another couple of weeks. Okay. Yeah. Enjoy. Back in St. Louis. And,
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you. Happy Hanukkah.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Chanukah Sameach, and we should have good news.
Enjoy, take care.
All good things.
Chanukah Sameach.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.